Welcome to Improv Your Parenting, the art of turning parenting into play. We're joined today by Olivia Walton. Olivia hails from California's San Francisco Bay Area. Her passion for prov started 20 years ago in high school, where she had the privilege to train with two extremely talented Bay Area theater sports coaches. She then played on the University of Oregon's improv team, Absolute Improv, for 4 years. She's been a pro player with comedy sports in Portland, Oregon, and since moving to New York, worked with MopCo Improv Theater in Schenectady in various long-form and theater sports formats. Olivia develops and teaches improv, puppet, and theater classes at Saratoga Performing Arts Center School of the Arts. Olivia, thank you so much for joining us on the Improv Your Parenting podcast. The one question I have for everybody is, how do you interact with kids, and in what way does improv influence that interaction?
It's a great question. I'll start by saying how I used to interact with kids. I used to be afraid to interact with kids. I have a 1-year-old now. It's part of my day-to-day life. Certainly no choice. Even before that, I've been teaching improv to kids.
Wow.
That also was terrifying when I had never done it before. So much of it is leaning into the play aspect of the interaction. If I can latch on to anything that a kid says or does that's them asking to be played with, that's how I like to start the interaction. It's not necessarily jumping into a character immediately because although they leaning into the exploration, like they want to check something out. It mostly stems from curiosity. And I feel like if you address the curiosity, then you're establishing trust and you're also fulfilling a need that they have.
You brought up a couple of really good points, and I want to go to play first, but then I want to come back to the fear because I want to touch on both of those. Can you tell me more about finding the play with the kids and finding out where they like to play, how they like to play, and what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. That immediately made me think of the game New Choice because I think that play is a lot of fun and sometimes you have to redirect. I'm thinking about a lot of kids that immediately go to potty humor and developmentally it's super funny for them. I don't want to deny that choice. I also want to encourage them to go beyond that and think beyond that. So I won't deny it. I'll just really quickly, positively, new choice. What's something else that you might find a banana in? It's encouraging them to come up with something creatively so that they don't feel denied in that sense. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. What is the reaction that kids will usually have when you offer them the opportunity to provide a new choice?
Sometimes it throws them off a little bit, but I think most of the time they like the challenge and they're open to it. They'll go for it.
I want to get back to the fear that you have expressed, particularly working with kids, is when you were first starting, what was that fear? And then how did you move beyond it to be able to do it regularly?
The fear stemmed from the lack of knowing what I was doing, fear of the unknown, fear of incompetence or ignorance of my own ignorance. And so being able to move past that, I'm really lucky to have a great mentor. She's very much more that educator. She has a teaching background. She's our director at the school and she's wonderful. She gave me a lot of tools to navigate classroom dynamics and regulate the room. I've also been lucky to work with Lacey Alana. Lacey Alana and Jim Ansaldo are both really wonderful improvisers and they run a camp called Camp Yes and in Indiana.
Yes, I'm interviewing Jim in 1.5 or 2 weeks.
Jim's lovely. Jim and Lacey run this great camp, which you'll hear all about. A lot of it is about just being attentive to needs of students and how diverse students are, especially if they're on the autism spectrum or identify as neurodiverse. Going back to the fear aspect, the more experience and the more I learned about all these facets of teaching and interacting, tapping into the energies and the needs of students, that enabled me to feel so much more confident in my own ability to give them a space that felt comfortable enough to create and to practice improv, which is ultimately our goal as improv instructors.
And what a great gift then you had before you had your child to be able to get over that fear so that you're already at a place where you can do that confidently with your child.
Yeah, I still have questions around where boundaries will come into play, I'm sure, because
Yeah.
that's even something that happens in classes on a regular basis because you don't want to stifle creativity, but you also want to be corrective enough so that the student understands what you're trying to get across or teach them. And you want them to be safe. And there's so much to consider around boundaries. But how do you lean into boundaries and be playful at the same time?
And I would imagine too, then based on your experience, if you were talking to somebody who's new to this space, would you be able to help them get over that fear? And if so, how would you help them move beyond the, I don't know how to play with my kid fear that they might have?
My biggest tip or advice would be practice and remembering that it's not going to be perfect every time, but the intentionality is what matters. So if
Yeah.
you're practicing with intention and you're self aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and even pushing yourself past some of those boundaries, like for me, I'm a safety person. So if my kid is reaching for something, my son's name is Ezra. If Ezra is reaching for something and my immediate inclination is, oh, don't touch that, it might fall in your face or something. But the improviser in me and the part of me that's curious, I'm trying to let that part grow and be more open. So I let that curious part say, what will happen next? And also, what's the worst thing that happens if this lightweight plastic object falls in his face? He'll probably learn something, hopefully. And also, 9 times out of 10, he's totally unfazed by it if it does
Yeah.
fall on his face. Letting the thing happen is sometimes the hardest thing for me to do, but also the most constructive. And that is so applicable to improv. You have to trust your partner. You have to trust the people that you're playing with to just let the thing happen.
Yeah. I love that you say that because one of the big things that most parents struggle with is that balance between safety and giving them their space. A lot of parents, myself included, tend to lean towards safety more than space. I would love to learn how to be more open to that and let this play out. You might have to pay a little price for it, but you're going to learn in that process more than I could ever teach you by being like, no, don't. What guidance or what advice would you have about creating that space and letting that happen?
Yeah, I'm still figuring that out too. So when you figure it out, tell me. But it goes back to boundaries. I'm thinking about classes that I teach, letting a student know we've worked with paper screens, doing shadow puppets and things like that, being intentional about, hey, this is a safety issue. We want you to stay away from the screen so you don't fall or hurt yourself, damage the screen. There's many things that could happen. So you're still creating the boundary up front. It's the same thing if you're gamifying anything with a child or student. Establishing the rules makes the game fun. If you can foresee a boundary that might be an issue, call that out and be like, you can't go beyond that fence because it's spooky.
I really like that. So you set up the framework of here's the outer bounds of the safety, and then we can play whatever we want inside this space.
Yeah.
And is that, it sounds like you came into that and you developed that through being able to teach, being able to work with the kids through the training that you were doing. Is that idea or work you knew before going into that training in terms of the improv, or is it something that you had to develop through that training process?
I developed it while I was learning how to teach. It was about being as clear in your expectations as possible. And that was something I had not fully understood before starting to teach. A lot of that also comes into the discussion around accessibility and how important it is to lay out all of the things that you're able to offer and facilitate like tools in the classroom, whether you have writing utensils for individuals who are low speech or other aids for people who are low hearing. If you're able to create those expectations and set them forward from the get-go, it's going to help everybody. And so this also goes into universal design for learning, where I teach, which is really fun and fascinating and difficult. It's just about trying to make space for everyone to come in and have a good experience.
You mentioned as well those who are on the autism spectrum or neurodiverse. Do you do anything different to enable that community to participate in ways that they wouldn't be able to otherwise? Have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I would say so it's different for everybody,
Sure.
obviously. What and everyone always says if you've met one person on the autism spectrum, you've met one person on the autism spectrum, which is I'll say it forever and ever because it's so important. And
Yeah.
so I am thinking about some individuals who I've worked with before who like a self-regulatory behavior is very much like moving around the room. And so sometimes that like having someone I think Rachel Garman Williams is another person who I've crossed paths with. They have talked about inclusion facilitators. So having someone in the classroom who's able to hone in on being able to bring someone into whatever exercise or game you're playing in an inclusive way so that everyone is getting to play. But their participation just might look a little bit different than someone else's participation. So the answer is yes. I've definitely dealt with a variety of students and their participation needs are all totally different. And so it's always very helpful having a second person in the room who can check in while I'm maybe still leading the exercise. And if I'm that person checking in, it's all about, hey, what's a thing that we can add to this? Do you have a word that this makes you think of? And sometimes they say no, and that's okay. And sometimes you just are with them to make sure they're cool. Hey, do you need a break? Do you need some water? Whatever it is. And it really depends on the student. I know it's a very long-winded answer.
Oh, it's a good answer. And I'm trying to think of then how, as a parent, if I'm working with, or not working with, playing with my own neurodivergent child, how I would then adjust any of what we're talking about to meet them where they are, what they need from this interaction. Is there anything that you might be able to see as, okay, if I'm working with an autistic child, I might play with them with this kind of approach to it rather than this other approach?
The first thing that made me think of is energy. So because it's going to be different, like depending on where your child is in that moment, how they feel, what the situation is that they're getting involved in, or that you're like, if you're trying to get them involved in an activity versus if you're like an observer of the activity, like seeing a show or something like that. But I think a lot of it, at least for me, it deals with energy. Have you read any of Patsy Rodenberg's, like The Second Circle?
I haven't.
Okay.
No, tell me about that.
That's my latest thing that I'm reading about is she talks about, we have 3 circles that we move through. There's first circle energy, which she associates with posture. So very inward, maybe arms crossed, feet are pointed inward, breath is more shallow. Third circle is very open. You might be calling to a crowd. If someone is an orator, you might listen to them for a little while, but you might ultimately lose connection with them. And then second circle is more grounded. You can receive as much as you can give. And it's idyllic for the improviser because it's all about giving and taking and all of that, taking up space and giving space. So I'm thinking about that in terms of how I now interact with kids is being in second circle is being very present, and that presence helps them feel more secure. And so if we as parents or as educators are able to stay in that space with them, then it gives them the room to, even if they don't specifically articulate the need, we can maybe pick up on what the need is. Oh, I think you might be hungry because it's been a couple hours since you've eaten anything. Or I think you really want to play this game. Let's see if we can find a way for you to, even if it's you saying a word, or maybe you come up with me. You know what I mean?
It sounds like some of the secret then is to have that presence and have that sort of openness to what offers are they giving me?
Yes.
And not necessarily by word, but just by facial expression, by body language, by all that.
Yeah.
And then try to read those offers in some way that, like, is this what?
Yeah. Yes. You articulated it very well. Yeah. It's all about the unspoken offers sometimes, especially.
Yeah. I'm trying to think in terms of parenting then, it's to be able to move beyond the words and then to say, what is my child telling me in all the different ways that they can express themselves?
Yeah.
That either they have something they need, something they want to do, something like that. Is that kind of the leave yourself open to being able to see that?
Yeah. One example I have recently has been my son Ezra will reach for my face. And for a while I was like, what do you like? Do you just want me? Like, you're just happy to see me? You're waving at me? I don't know. But now I do this thing where I lean in to his fingers
nice.
and it becomes this game. Yeah. Yeah. Literally leaning into the behavior.
That's awesome. He's going to be very lucky. He'll grow up like being able to play and being able to interact with people in a way that's hopefully helpful to him as an adult. Does your experience in improv come from your childhood at all? Or is this something you came to later in life and developed on your own?
Yes and yes. But yeah, so I'll start by saying this. I always say everyone is an improviser but they might not know it yet. I started my improv practice when I was in high school. I was very lucky to have amazing coaches. And so I got on the improv team and we'd play games and we'd rehearse twice a week and we'd have shows and it was so much fun. Yeah, it was amazing. So that was in California. And I had my coaches played with Bay Area theater sports, and one of them teaches at Stanford now as an improv teacher, and they're wonderful. Yeah. But before that, and this was also, I will get in. So before that, yes, both of my parents are very creative people. And so I grew up with a lot of storytelling and a lot of different voices and characters. My dad was very animated, as well as my mom. My dad was the self-identified actor. My mom was just a very creative individual. And it's actually really fun because now seeing them as grandparents, they do the things that they did with me. And I'm like, oh, that's where that comes from. That's so cool. Yeah. Without being an actor, my mom is so playful. She's so like full of emotion in the way that she interacts with children. And so it's just really, I felt so lucky realizing, oh, okay, that's really great.
That then it instilled it within you to be able to then get trained and understand it more and have those skills, and then to be able to offer it to those who are taking your classes as well as Ezra in terms of your personal life. What a great way to also, I would imagine then for those whose parents weren't that creative, playful, whatever, to say, you know what, starts here. Like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, totally. And if you have it and if you're aware of it and if it brings you joy, that's what you lean into.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Very neat. I know Ezra is only about a year old, but have you dealt with any situations where there's tension and you have to diffuse a conflict situation? And if so, have you been able to use any of these skills and tools to help do that?
Yeah, some of it is about redirection. I feel, especially with a 1-year-old, I'm not yet at the age where he'll fixate on something quite as
Yeah.
much as maybe an older child would. But yeah, a lot of it is redirection. And it's funny, I was trying to draw a parallel. I feel like a lot of these parallels are about like my experience in teaching improv versus like performing improv, which I haven't really gotten to do in a while. But I will say sometimes in an improv scene, if something's not working and you're like stuck in a long form or something, sometimes redirecting is fine. If you need that tool, yes, anding is really important. And if you can integrate what's already been established into the scene, then wonderful. If that, and similarly with parenting, if you can integrate the need into whatever you redirect your child to doing, then great, because there's obviously a need there, but maybe there's a safety issue and boundary setting isn't working. You can redirect to, I see that you want to do this thing. You want to move your body in some kind of way, or you want to be tactile. You want to be touching something. Let's touch this thing that's safer for you to touch or whatever.
It's not a stone, it's a ball.
Yeah.
And so then when you're doing the teaching, have you found that there's conflict resolution that you've had to do? And have you been able to use improv to do that in that space as well?
I think improv is useful for doing pretty much anything. And if anything, it just makes me more present or attentive. And yes, I've conflict resolution. If I have a student come to me and say, hey, so-and-so said this or made me feel this way, then I usually try to bring them out of the classroom and say, hey, let's hash this out really quick. I want to hear from person A first. What happened? Okay. What happened for you? And so hearing both sides of that. And so that's so much of that is listening and staying present. And again, going back to that energy of just holding the space. I'm not mad. I'm not like everything's fine. I just want to know what happened. Okay, great. It sounds like we have some big feelings. Is there anything that we can do to make this better? So yeah, it's not making everything like dire or negative. It's all about just, hey, we're all just trying to get along. We're all just trying to play our scenes.
We're just here to have a good time. Come on.
Just here to have a good time. We're just here to play some improv.
Very cool. As Ezra grows up, do you see the way you interact with him changing? And if so, obviously you don't know yet fully what that'll look like and what he'll want in that relationship, but what ways are you thinking about going forward about, oh, I'm really looking forward to being able to do this with him because I don't get to do that yet.
Yeah. I say all the time, I can't wait to communicate with him in new ways because our communication is already just changing day to day.
Every day.
And and that part's really cool because so much of it is figuring out like what the need is. I'm actually really scared that I'm going to be too authoritative or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, this is back to what you were talking about of like you want to have the balance of the play and the fun. And where do those boundaries come in? How do you establish the boundary in a way that makes sense? And especially if it's the game just naturally evolves and starts to happen, then how do you throw in the rule of, oh, just kidding, we have to do it this way or whatever. So I'm nervous about that, but I'm also just trusting that, again, like any improviser it's a practice. So it's all about just trying different things and seeing what works and knowing that there's going to be failure and accepting the failure and all of that.
It's funny in that space is that even when you just follow the game and you're going with it, something hits the edge of it and you're like, oh, pause. Okay, so now this is what we're going to just running in the road. Okay, cool. Good.
Yeah. Yeah. I've also noticed, and you've probably identified this too, kids at a certain age, at least, identify like fairness in a really specific way. So it's, oh, but you said this. And I'm like, you're right. I did say that. Sometimes it's disappointing when things don't go the way that we want them to go.
Yes. I think that's a key thing too, is you bring it up, is to be able to say, you know what? I think I was wrong. And I made a mistake. For safety reasons, we'll have to do this. Even though I said this other thing, I realized that left us open to the safety issue. And now I have to go back and fix that. And hopefully kid will be disappointed, but they'll also be like, oh, I learned a lesson. You can make mistakes.
Yeah. And the acknowledgement of it, being able to identify it, and then, and you're modeling behavior for them to recognize, oh, like it's okay to make mistakes and we can all support each other as we move through them.
Yeah. And we're a team and we want to play a game. So let's play the game in a way that we don't lose an arm.
Right. Yeah.
Very cool. Is there anything that you would like to share with people who will be becoming parents and something just to keep in mind of as you approach this journey? Here's something just to allow you to walk into the territory in a way that you're not going to just start stumbling on things.
Just reiterating that it is something to practice. And so much of it is just having the intentionality behind what are your goals as a parent. And I always hesitate to say, make a list of the thing, because sometimes when someone tells me to do that, I'm like, I'm not going to do that. That's silly.
I don't want to write it down too.
Write things down. Yeah, who does that? Yeah. But sometimes if you really feel strongly about it, or make a list in your head or whatever makes sense for you as a human being, setting an intention for yourself. And sometimes even moving through the day with a mantra, or I think that is sometimes very powerful, because even though it's not some sort of SMART goal, I'm going to make 3 good parenting decisions today, it can still be, I'm going to look for where the laughter is, or I'm going to be gentle with myself, or I'm going to have a snack this afternoon, or whatever it is. Especially if you're going to be a new parent, taking care of yourself is so important. And because that enables you to take care of your child so much better and fuller and in a more meaningful way. So whether it's a mantra or a goal or anything like that, I would say set an intention either on a daily basis or just have a mantra of some sort of practice that you can implement. I think that can be really powerful because it sets you on that path of intention.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really take out of improv is a lot of it is about the relationship. And maybe one of the intentions as an overarching thing is it's always about the relationship between you and your kid, right? And so if it comes down to what will help this relationship, then you don't get angry about the stuff that's not going to be helpful.
Yeah.
I love your idea of the intention, because if you always have that in the back of your mind, it's okay, let me lean to that, whatever that is.
Yeah, it's funny that it just made me think of this conversation I just had with my husband the other day. He doesn't like shoveling the snow in the driveway. And I was out there shoveling the other day, and I told him that at the very end of the driveway, when you get to the big pile from the plows, that's when I feel the most, oh man, this is a big we don't have a snowblower, so we're manual shoveling. And I told him that's when I go into my Zen mode. It's like just one scoop at a time. And he goes, oh, that's when I get mad. I think that is such a funny, not funny, like we had an interesting conversation as a result of that. Because again, it came into what are we doing with the energy? Because of course, as a parent, we're gonna get mad. And so I think a lot of it, and maybe this comes from being an improviser, but being able to the energy and go, it's such a psychological thing sometimes, just like one scoop at a time, just do the next thing you can do. Yeah. And that is directly related to yes and in improv. You have to just do the next thing. Planning ahead is sometimes really detrimental to a good scene.
Yeah. And the next thing is the only thing you got.
Yeah.
And so you just do that. And I love the sort of one scoop at a time mentality as well, because basically what you're saying is, I don't know how this is all going to go, but if I do this one thing, something happens.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about that with kids, it's what's this one thing I'm going to do to respond to the one thing they just did.
Yeah. And it reduces overwhelm. So especially in parenting, if
Yes.
you give them the one choice, because that's another thing that I do is I'm a planner. So I'm 5 steps ahead all the time.
Yes.
And so sometimes I have to check myself and I have to just say, what's the next thing that we have to do? And I think that's also a good thing to model as a parent is saying, this is the next choice we have to make. We're either going to do this or do this. What would you like to do?
Yeah.
Which of these two things?
It makes it so much simpler than here's the whole day ahead of us.
Yeah.
Olivia, this has been so wonderful. I really enjoyed the conversation. I have so much more I can learn from you. I have a ton more questions I could ask, but I don't want to take too much more of your time on this one. I'd love to talk to you again at some point if we can arrange it and that makes sense for your schedule. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.